Today's conversation is on supporting loved ones who identify as transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer. Here we have some information on Shift. So Shift Collab is an integrated mental health firm offering therapy and training across Canada with a team over 100 therapists and 12 support staff nationally. We're able to support over 7,000 individuals through therapy and offering counseling supports, as well as workshops such as the one that you're joining us here this evening. Additionally, we are able to design and implement large-scale healthcare solutions and education programs like Maple's therapy service and high-touch EAP alternatives. So just a brief background of what Shift Collab does and has been doing and offering for folks throughout Canada. Now we'll get into a brief introduction on who we as facilitators are. So I will allow Joyce to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Joyce and my pronouns are they, them. I'm the MSW student and psychotherapy intern at Shift. As an Asian non-binary lesbian person with lived immigration experience, I strive to create a compassionate, safe, and brave space to explore and affirm your identities.
Okay. And myself, Martha, I am a registered social worker. I have worked and supported 2 LGBTQ plus persons in diverse settings, including drop-in centers for youth within the shelter sector, counseling programs throughout the city of Toronto. I value inclusive practices for care and well-being, and I identify as a queer Latinx person within my work to be able to bring both the professional and the personal lived experience to support individuals. Firstly, I'd like to bring forward some reference terms that we will be discussing and noting throughout our presentation. First, using the acronym that you see as followed, with it being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and plus terms may be fluid. And these are all not all exhaustive, but a point of starting the conversation. Additionally, certain groups, either Indigenous or cultural groups, may utilize own teachings and terms for identity, such as Two-Spirit, used only by Indigenous persons. We want to make it known that a person's gender identity may be deeply personal and may also fall in between labels, as we will discuss further. Additional terms to make note of brought on by a source on the Toronto PFLAG are as followed, and we'll be using some within our presentation. So transgender is a gender identity that does not align with gender assigned at birth. Similarly, genderqueer identity is not aligning or aligning with a combination of a male or female gender. Non-binary individuals may experience a gender identity that is neither binary female, male, or beyond the binary. And another piece to make note of is gender dysphoria, a profound, persistent state of distress or pain that can impair daily life functioning. So once again, these are all not all exhaustive, but some of the terms and references that we will make note of this evening. Objectives that we have for the evening include wanting to promote inclusive language, so ask, not assume. 2, to show empathy, understanding, learning, and supporting the experiences of others. 3, to engage in active learning, engaging in your own learning to support your loved one, shows your care and your willingness to open your understanding to new terms or experiences. And 4, to join in allyship. So essentially walking the talk, using your voice and action behind words. Part 1 will be discussing how you can begin to show support to your loved one. That could look like navigating your loved one's identity, which may bring up complex feelings. We want to propose asking what your loved one needs on their journey opens up a path to show your support by asking and using pronouns. For example, she, her, or they, them, using both interchangeably than just one set. If you make a mistake, which we all do, acknowledge and move on. For example, myself, I use both she, her, and they, them pronoun and wish for someone to refer me as interchangeably within these sets. And another important piece to make note of is using their preferred name and not Deng naming, which is name prior to transition. So always asking and not assuming is important to be able to, once again, show that loved one that you care and are interested in supporting their journey. And similarly, affirming a transition process is also personal, whether embarking on a new gender expression journey or seeking gender affirming care. Your support is welcomed. Part 2 is starting to think beyond the gendered language. And that could look like additional support to your loved one, can look like and be inclusive language in everyday conversations rather than, hey, ladies and gentlemen. Using non-gendered language like, hey, folks, can be more inclusive to genderqueer and non-binary identities. And for some questions, and we'll take a few moments to process, what are other examples of non-gendered greetings to use in a group setting? Feel free to share your responses in the chat and think through. And then Joyce, if you don't mind, taking a look at that chat. So any other examples of non-gendered greetings to use in a group setting?
So we are seeing that hello friends, hello lovely humans, and hello everyone. And yo, hi all, hi folks. Yeah, so these are all non-gendered language that we could use in a group setting, or yeah, also like hey people.
Okay, so thank you folks for your responses, and that's what we hope to bring forward, is that introduction of non-gendered language, inclusive language that can have folks of different identities feeling safe, feeling comfortable in engaging in new spaces or even in spaces in the home. So we'll continue the conversation as I will pass on the facilitating to my colleague, Joyce.
The next part, we are going to talk about how support in family looks like. Studies show that family rejection negatively impacts transgender youth's mental health. They may experience isolation, depression, and they might have suicidal ideation because of the family rejection and non-affirming family environment. So it is important to actively listen, learn, and validate your loved one's experiences, because when they disclose their identities to you, it means that they trust you and are willing to let you in their journey. And we also need to make sure who they have shared their identities with before and ask their willingness of sharing their identities with others. Some of them might be willing to share only with friends, and some family members, others might not. So we also need to respect their choices of coming out. And for people who identify as transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer, you don't have to come out to your families to be authentic. Your identities are still valid. If you are not comfortable with coming out or don't feel safe to do so, and after your loved ones disclose their identities with you, we need to make sure how they would like to be addressed. As we discussed before, try to use some non-gendered language. For example, using sibling instead of brother or sister, use parent, sibling instead of aunt or uncle. Or some of them might be willing to address directly through their preferred names. You could also consider discussing some new ways to address within the family, since sometimes the language are pretty gendered and limited to describe. And last but not least, ask questions with permission. You might be eager to show your support to or to be curious about your loved one's experiences, but you also need to understand some questions might be triggering for them. Next slide, please. And one of the ways we practice our support is to use gender affirming language. So we are going to talk about some differentiations between gender affirming language and non-affirming language. For example, like use transgender instead of transgendered. And we use he was assigned male at birth instead of he used to be a female. And we use since she transitioned instead of since she changed her sex, because gender is not a phase for them. Then we need to use the language that the individuals self-identified with. It's okay if some of them told you that they are still exploring and they're not sure about that. Respect it and give them some time to explore it freely. And every queer person has a unique experiences. So some terms might not fit with them. It's okay not to use any labels, and that the terms and words they are using might change over time. We also need to understand that what questions might not okay to ask as well. For example, asking their birth name, it might be also a triggering experience or re-traumatize them. Unless, like in some cases, they are willing to share with you their birth name. Yeah. And next slides, please. And we have shared some of the basic ways of supporting your loved ones who identify with transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer. We also need to remember that this is a continuous learning process for everyone. We are all building a supporting environment for people who identify with transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer. We could learn from some educational materials such as books, documentaries, videos, and attending some workshops. And then show your support through concrete actions, especially when you find out their rights are violated. When your intimate relationship partner come out to you, sometimes you might feel confused and start to explore your sexuality, or you might feel distressed. You could consider having to have an open communication with your loved ones, and also don't hesitate to seek for help, such as having a psychotherapy session or seeking for other peer support groups. They may have some same experiences that they could share with you. And remember to keep on learning and keep on reflecting yourself.
Okay. I'm curious, as we go into this discussion, what are folks' understanding of what concrete actions could look like in supporting a loved one or a person close to you with a diverse identity? Any suggestions, examples, perhaps, if folks have gone on this journey with supporting their loved ones, what could concrete actions look like? Feel free to use the chat function again.
I've seen from the chat that ask question first, don't assume. Yeah. Correcting surrounding individuals when their loved ones' pronouns are incorrectly, action of support. Show your pronouns as a habit. Yeah. Connect with community support groups and ask questions about how to support. And also ask about their journey, ask whether or what if they want from you for support. Yeah, that all could be some concrete actions.
Very nice. Thank you folks for sharing your willingness to walk the talk and to engage in a reflective process as folks, whether with lived experience or wanting to support as allies, wanting to do so in a way that's mindful, that has empathy in mind, that has the other individual, your loved one in mind as well. So really wanting to drive the message that it's a continuous learning process, even for me as a clinician, as I work with folks from diverse gender experiences, that I do the same thing, that I walk the talk where I can, and be able to be flexible, and make note of, if I make a mistake, that I want to learn and I want to be better for not only the people around me, but the folks I support within my work.
Here are some of the community resources that we found that are helpful. There are such as Toronto PFLAG and Asian Queer Alliance. The Asian Queer Alliance is a space created by and for queer Asians of marginalized genders in Toronto. And they work with and for their community, for Asian queer communities, to create connections, foster friendships, and provide some social support. And they have some events and workshops. So this is a good community resources.
Additionally, areas or spaces like Toronto PFLAG, which I know offers volunteer spaces, or online spaces where folks can connect with other individuals and seek that peer support space, especially at this time where it might be difficult or challenging to meet in person. Individuals are also able to access online spaces, as well as EGAL, Canada, or additional sources of learning and knowledge to familiarize yourself with, to continue on this conversation. So we do want to thank you for joining. We do have some time if there are any questions. Once again, feel free to use the chat function, as we are able to take some time to dedicate to any questions or answers or reflections that come to mind as we process and we present this topic.
I've seen a question from the chat box. It's, what is the best way to apologize or fix when you make a mistake and use the wrong pronoun?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Similarly speaking, that, or mentioning earlier, that we are all prone to making mistakes, and we want to come from that place that is genuine to own up and take accountability. And that can be uncomfortable, that could be new, and that allows also for that processing to happen. So whether it's owning it up, apologizing, letting the individual know that it was a mistake, and being able to, again, take actions to walk the talk, to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen, or you're able to reflect on it yourself, on why there was harm in that place to do so.
And also, you can just acknowledge it and don't overact on it, like saying, oh my God, it's my fault. Like that's could make the others feel uncomfortable, rather than you could just saying like, I'm sorry, I make these mistakes, and I will remember to use the correct pronouns in the future. And the next question is, are there any non-gender terms? Sibling, parent, parent, sibling, spouse, child.
To use similarly, I know folks, whether it's rather than girlfriend or boyfriend, using partner or spouse, right? So again, we want to be able to ask questions, see what the other person prefers, right? And again, the community is so resourceful and creative that there are different terms to make note of. I believe for sibling, I have heard nibbling as a neutral term to use. So once again, these are all part of the conversation, and that's what we want. Have a conversation to be able to explore what support could look like in diverse ways and matters.
Yeah. And another question is, as a teacher, sometimes my students use different pronouns at school versus home. How do you folks navigate that with your clients? For example, respecting the person, but understanding they might not be out to their adults.
Sure. I think, again, having that conversation and making known where is a safer space to use, whether it's preferred pronouns or gender identity, understanding that, yes, environments, whether it's home or different environments, might not be as safe. So really wanting to express that ability to create that safer space. So asking a student, what pronouns can I use when you're in the classroom, or what can I refer to you as, versus, if there is parents or family environments that aren't as safe, which unfortunately is what comes up with, at least in my work, understanding that there's a lot of hardship within the community. So being able to extend that listening ear, that safer space goes a long way.
And another question, like building up on an earlier question, do you have any suggestions for supporting colleagues who have expressed that they really struggle to use the right pronouns? So they are thinking of cases where coworkers may speak English as their second or third language, maybe newcomers to Canada and have grown up in cultures that have different attitudes towards LGBTQIA plus rights, etc.
Another really great question. We hope to build that awareness where we can to, be gentle in that learning process, right? That it happens for myself, that it happens for others, understanding that some cultural backgrounds either have their own understanding of different identities, but also there could be biases there as well, and being gentle in that approach, right? And wanting to invite that conversation. So it isn't an overnight process, as opposed to one that really strives for that patience to be able to have someone heard, but also for that other individual to be heard as well if they are having challenges in understanding terms, understanding identities. Anything else on your end, Joyce?
That's pretty much. There is also a common, or not just a question, like one of the hardest thing for me has been supporting while setting limits and boundaries with those who are not supportive.
I hear that. And one thing I talk about with folks is the ability or the importance of chosen family, and really being able to rely on those supportive spaces versus the non-supportive, or those spaces that are challenging, to really bolster up those places that respect and value an individual. And we hope to do so more and more in this world as we have these conversations, as you join spaces like this. So once again, we really want to thank you folks for taking the time to join us in this conversation. And by no means is this the end of the conversations. This is just a part of the conversation that we were hoping to offer this evening.